今日は泊まり込みかな。
Sachka, there's a fourth wall around here. Please respect it. We opened this week with Longo reporting it to his new bosses about how they'd have to go about fulfilling Boka's massive order, which would require them to throw away any sort of subtlety. I mean, granted, it's not as though everyone was just ignoring the many disappearances that they were causing over the course of the series, but there was also a level of plausible deniability that there was anything big going on, especially after Team Gavv managed to save a lot of the victims. And Stomach Inc. itself, kind of wisely, didn't want to drop too much attention, which would of course cause the human world to go on alert. So what did this new, hip female president of the company have to say to that?
パパの依頼だもの。頑張って。
Nepotism hires in a nutshell. I also like this little touch of Jeep almost rejecting this, as even he recognized that this would likely end up hurting their company in the long run, but his wife wore the pants in this relationship, plus he had to stay on her good side for personal reasons. Meanwhile, Shoma was stockpiling gochujos for each time he'd have to refill the gochi pod. And in a bit of kind of dark comedy, the inside of the pod was a full-on amusement park. Ah, how nice, they can enjoy their final moments of life before they're inevitably called. Though at least they followed that with a slightly more wholesome gag, where they tried to hide the gochujos behind Shoma and Sachika when one of the latter's friends, Ritsun, showed up. She wanted them to help make her some merch for her Oshi. Okay, seriously, why has that become such a common vernacular for me these days? But yeah, said Oshi was... Oh, sorry, I think we found Saber Spark's personal collection. No, this was, for whatever reason, the band Ritsu was into, known as UMA, which if you've seen Uma Musume, you know what that means.
Ultimate Music Achievers.
Sure, keep telling yourself that, girl. But yeah, I guess this is like the live-action adaptation of that franchise, though personally I never really got into it myself, though I will admit the designs were cute. Meanwhile, this just kind of feels like a full-on troll move by the creators of the show, but oh well, I guess this is just a cute little joke, and I'm sure they won't pull any other excessive bits of trolling later. Anyway, Ritsu was still only a recent fan to this group, and thus, while she had lucked out and managed to get a ticket to their concert from her senpai, she didn't have any merch to cheer them with, and I'm guessing official stuff for something like this had already sold out, because I'm sure it did appeal to something beyond a very niche audience, right? So of course, she turned to a couple of friends to bail her out, and oh god, Shoma's an AOT fan. But yeah, they of course first need to get some materials if they want to make their own merch. What are your secrets? Anyway, another reason Ritsun didn't try to get any official merch was because she wanted to properly express her affection for this group through her own handmade goods, which is honestly pretty nice, and I'm guessing it'll play into some sort of development for Shoma later. However, the wholesome times did have to come to an end, as after a needlessly dramatic bit of Longo declaring the start to his operations from the top of a building that was nowhere near where they were striking. But yeah, they launched simultaneous attacks at a baseball stadium, cruise liner, and a Boeing 616. Yeah, the first two did have some exact numbers of 33,234 and 2,018 victims respectively. However, they didn't say anything about the plane, probably because it would be a far less impressive number of only up to 87 people, including passengers and crew. Regardless, adding all of that up did total up to 35,339 victims, which yeah, would cause a little bit of noise. Of course, the writers all caught on to this and decided to meet. Lockyer revealed that they were likely using the same methods that he had used to capture happy people by first roofing them. It worked well for him because he was a jellyfish with a lot of appendages, and the actual toxin was given to him by Nival, who probably still had the formula. Understandably, this didn't sit well with the third rider, as it just reminded him of how he almost ended up getting a lot of people ground up into jello for a bunch of addicts. I also really like this little bit of visual storytelling of Shoma noticing his friend's distress. And as they were leaving, Locky ended up revealing that he felt bad about something, or rather someone else, learning about his crimes.
サチカはあの時の失踪事件の犯人は俺だと知ってるのか?
Hey, what's the ship doing here? But yeah, again, this is a really good bit where Shoma said that he related to Lakia, but Hanto correctly pointed out that the circumstances were a little different, as Shoma didn't actively try to send A1 to the presses. Thus, if Lakia wanted to get closer to Sachika, he would inevitably have to address these issues. With that in mind, and before going to help with the search, Lakia decided to pay a visit to Dente, who, as we saw in the last episode, was no longer with us, and...
おい起きろ
No.
You know, I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of think that they were tricking us because it was such a sudden death and everything, but at the same time, I figured that they wouldn't try to be so trolly with us, but obviously I forgot what company we're dealing with. Anyway, he asked Dente to create an antidote for the toxins that the Stomachs were using, and which he still had in his own system. Meanwhile, said evil corporation decided to strike another plane, and hey, I think that's one of ours. But yeah, some agents and part-timers snuck on as crew members.
倍の闇菓子が約束されてる。やるしかねえな。
I knew it was weird when I didn't get my peanuts. But yeah, they were using a new gas device created by Nival, which, yeah, is legit terrifying, especially for the Japanese, who had to go through the sarin gas attacks back in 1995. Shoma arrived and tried to stop them, but was held off by Longo, who, I guess for a dramatic effect, decided to just sit down in that chair, as he was clearly not in it when Shoma boarded the plane. But yeah, as much as this guy dressed and acted like a try-hard edgelord, he quickly proved that he would be able to back up those words. The other riders quickly joined in, and I think Kohei Shoji lost his hat here, but they just had to go with his take, I guess. More importantly, Hanto was now facing down his mother's killer.
どれだか知らないが、昔はそんなこともあったかもな。
It was Tuesday.
And even without transforming, Longo was able to just wail on the two riders, who could even land a hit thanks to his broken as all hell automatic barriers. All the while, some epic knockoff Sephiroth music played. Shoma of course tried to confront him, but was quickly taken down. From there, his brother monologued about why he hated Shoma so much. And not too surprisingly, at least based on the general tone of his family, it was because he was a colossal racist who believed wholeheartedly in the supremacy of his race and thus found a half-breed like Shoma to be, well... Yeah, for this next major arc of the series, it seems like the show is going to tackle another really hot-button issue with this and likely the stuff between Lakia and Sachika. In any case, Shoma broke out the Gochipod, and while it did manage to tank Longo's attacks and even eventually break through his barriers, he ultimately fell to him after he finally transformed into his really awesome looking true form, plus there was the little fact that Longo wasn't working on a time limit. With that, the riders were forced to retreat with, ironically enough, Shoma's only other form that had a shorter time limit. This was a really effective introduction to, maybe not the final boss of this series, but definitely a villain who's got a lot of build-up. Yeah, while I have my doubts about Longo being the final boss of the show, he still came off as a powerful physical and symbolic adversary for Shoma. It should especially be interesting to see how things play out in this arc, where hopefully they will try to retract things like a certain Grunko. Longo not only represents an effective escalation of the main conflict of the show, but also possibly a bit more of a touchy subject matter. Yeah, while I can't say for sure how far they'll take this, it does seem like this, and really all the Grand Newt's issues with humans, will be addressed as an allegory for real-life racial issues. As even for those who had no interest in the dark treats like Lakia, they did seem to treat humans with a degree of xenophobia or at least othering. The Stomachs and Joldocs were of course the worst of this, as they treated them like cattle, and yet biologically they're close enough that reproduction is possible, which should be looked into, and yet like Japan's own issues with mixed races, they treated Shoma like a monster. So yeah, and as long as they don't get too preachy, I'm interested in seeing where they'll take the story, especially as Lakia might become a foil to Longo's beliefs, as he is getting closer to Sachika. Though, even putting all of that aside and bringing back the mounting threat that Longo posed, it was really well done here, as not only was his little operation scarily successful, he also lived up to the hype of over half a season's worth of build-up. Their first battle, and major loss to him, did feel like a proper payoff to everything, unlike bringing back Dente, which, yeah, that was just an obnoxious little troll move, but whatever, this is still overall a really good episode to kick off this next major story arc of the show. Longo has some truly terrible views, so hopefully, like a horse, Shomo will be able to kick some sense into him. Thanks for watching, and if you're into some more unique UMAs, maybe you could check out some of our other videos on this channel. We've got all kinds of content on this channel that will hopefully continue to expand as we go into the next season. Look forward to whatever comes next. Until then though, farewell for now my friends, and if you'll excuse me, I think I'm going to try and make my own homemade treat using a recipe from Princessian. Seriously, those look actually pretty good.